Today, we talk about what to do if your website goes down.
This show is for everyone working at the coalface. Digital, business, marketing, social. This is At the Coalface with your host, Jason Greenwood.
Hello everybody, I'm Jason Greenwood and this is episode 19 of At the Coalface. We're going to talk about a somewhat unpleasant subject today. We're going to talk about something that probably will affect all or some of you at some point in your life, especially if you're in the digital space, if you own a website, if you run a website, if you are responsible for a website. Pardon me. And so it's something that I've recently gone through yet again. It's certainly not my first rodeo in this department, but certainly it brought to the fore some of the processes and the experiences that I go through and have been through previously, and hopefully something that you can learn from. So, assuming that you don't have a SaaS-based website, so a software as a service website, a cloud-hosted website, assuming you host your own website, so let's say you own a PrestaShop website or an OSCommerce website or a Magento website or any one of a myriad of self-hosted websites out there. That typically means you've got it hosted with a managed hosting provider, whether it be on AWS infrastructure or their own hosting infrastructure that they have co-located in a data center, etc. And you will also typically have a development partner or a application management partner that will be in play as well. So there's many different parties in play. So you as the merchant will be worried about your website and its uptime and making sure that it's always accessible to your customers. You'll be worrying about the integrated systems that are integrated to it, making sure that they stay up and accessible to the website so it can present data to your customers and then can download orders, etc. So I wanted to just talk about a recent experience I had and hopefully how you can perhaps apply that to your business and your own experience as you may go through this, because at some point or another, especially if you have a self-hosted platform, you will likely have a scenario where something happens with the infrastructure or the application and the site goes down for whatever reason, and it's down, and Murphy's Law will say that if it goes down, it'll probably go down in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. when nobody's there monitoring or looking after the website to notice it's even gone down, and your customer service staff are not even there to take a phone call or an email and get it back up and running again. So we had a similar situation to this the other night. Our website for HealthPost tends to be very robust. It tends to be very fast. We've got some heavy-duty infrastructure sitting underneath it. We've got some heavy-duty redundancy in place, etc. But for a bit of a unique reason, the other night at literally midnight, the site went down, and it was down from midnight till approximately 3 a.m. So that's about 3 hours worth of downtime, which in our game is an eternity, because we service an international customer base, and as a result of that, we're kind of taking orders 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and so 3 hours of downtime is significant for us. So typically speaking, when you are self-hosted, you'll have several parties that will be responsible for monitoring and alerting and responding to alerts in cases of outages or application performance issues. And first line of defense is often your web hosting provider. And then your second line of defense is often your development partner, so your web development partner, whoever's responsible for the application and enhancing it, improving it, maintaining it, and looking after it and babysitting it. So in our case, we've got both of those parties in play. First line of defense is our web hosting provider who has their own monitoring and alerting in place, and in a case of a site down scenario, they get alerted and they typically deal with it in a first line scenario, whether it be a server restart that's required, whether it's a database failure, whatever the case may be. They respond in the first instance, and then they will escalate to our development partner if it's something to do with the application stack, so to do with the Magento platform itself or the underlying stack that supports Magento from a software perspective. They don't deal with the software, they deal with basically the hardware. all the way up to the operating system sitting on the hardware. So anything above that into the application stack, they typically don't have a lot to do with unless it's an underlying infrastructural issue. So I don't want to belabor the point, but basically that's kind of the scenario that most businesses will find themselves in, is they'll have a couple of different responsible parties and they may not even know who's responsible in a given situation. So you always want someone first on the line, that you don't have to wonder whether somebody's going to be looking into the situation if your site goes down. So ensure that you have something in place, an agreement, a relationship, a contract, an SLA, which is a service level agreement, or something in place with your hosting provider and or your application partner, your development partner, your web partner, whatever your relationship is with that partner, and make sure somebody is responsible. So in this particular scenario, our site went down, and in hindsight, what caused it to go down was a backup that used up a regular scheduled backup that used up all of the hard disk space on the database server. There was a number of different reasons behind that. I won't get into the technical detail, but basically it caused the database server to crash. The web server couldn't pull data from the database to render it on the site, and the whole site went down. Now, our web hosting provider is typically responsible for a whole raft of unique scenarios and reasons. They weren't able to respond as quickly as they normally would, and as a result of that, by the time they got to it, by the time they responded to the alert and identified the issue, fixed it, and got the site back up again, that was 3 hours worth of downtime. Now, as I said, in our business, that's a huge amount of time. So when we arrived the next morning, so this happened on a weeknight, and so in the morning when we arrived, we had seen all of the alerts that had come through to our email addresses, our merchant email addresses, because myself and the boss and a few other people in the business will get email alerts in cases of application issues or site outages. So, but by that time, the issue had been resolved, the site was back up again, and there wasn't a whole lot we could do at that point. So what needed to happen at that point was a very rapid post-mortem to make sure that whatever caused the problem wasn't going to cause the problem to happen again. Make sure that we mitigate that situation for future situations, and make sure that we eliminate that source of potentially bringing the site down again in future. But the thing from a strategic perspective that I want you guys to understand is that you can freak out, you can flip out, and you can start kind of looking for someone to blame, both in your organization, with your development partner, with your hosting provider, whoever is quote unquote on the hook or responsible, or potentially responsible. The first instinct is to lash out. That's pretty typical. So you tend to ring up your developers, you tend to ring up your hosting company, you start getting on the blower and you start blowing people up. That tends to be pretty counterproductive in my experience. As working agency side previously in the developer space, we were on the receiving end of that in many instances where the infrastructure was actually at fault, but we as the development partner, were blamed. And, so nothing kind of gets anyone's backup worse than being attacked. And so my strongest recommendation to you is to take a deep breath. As long as the site is up and it's transacting, take a deep breath, step back, chill out, take stock of the situation, make the correct inquiries with your hosting company in the first instance, your development partner in the second, have them look at anything that might be in play that may be an issue, a root cause issue that may cause the issue to happen again, get some reassurances that it's not going to happen again, and then go through the process of mitigating that for future scenarios, whatever that may be. In our case, there's a few different mitigations we went through and we're going through. One is to move backups off the primary database server to somewhere else, so even if the hard disk fills up, it can't take down the primary production server, and there's a few other things. So I said all that to say, when I first arrived, in this role, it was on my agenda to go through all of the monitoring and alerting systems at a very granular level to completely understand what systems were in place, any gaps there, make sure that those were filled, and then make sure that the appropriate parties were alerted at the right times and in the right scenarios to make sure that the site stayed up, and then if it went down for whatever reason, it was put back into production very quickly. Now, because our site has historically been extremely reliable and has had virtually zero outages since it was originally stood up, I guess that was lower down my priority list, and as a result of that, many other things kind of displaced that when I first arrived in the business, so I hadn't gone through that exercise. So this was a great opportunity for me to go through the exercise. I was forced to go through the exercise to examine every system that was monitoring our website, both on the web server itself, on the database server, as well as remote services that connect in and check and basically ping the website to make sure that it's up from different places around the world. And so it was a fantastic opportunity for me to delve deep into that. I put some new systems into place on top of the systems that were already there. I channeled all of those various different monitoring systems, both the on-site and the off-site monitoring systems, and I channeled all of those alerts. Instead of having each of those systems firing off emails, firing off text messages, etc., I routed them all through a centralized monitoring and escalation management system known as OpsGenie, OpsGenie, and I'll put a link in the description here so that you can see what OpsGenie is. OpsGenie is very similar to other systems like PagerDuty and VictorOps. They're all similar in that they collect data from many different external systems. They act like a funnel. They collect all of those alerts, and then you can have different rule sets around teams that are responsible after certain thresholds and periods of time for responding to those, etc. So you can have them sent to text message, email, smartphone application, as well as phone. So they'll make automated phone calls to you if at a certain point of escalation no one responds, then it'll ring you, and you can have different people in your team be alerted based on different escalation levels and different on-call levels. So I put that into place. I routed all of our existing monitoring and alerting systems into that one system. I set up all of the escalations in that so that I knew that I had a safety net in place if the monitoring and alerting systems that the host had in place and that the development partner had in place, if any of those failed or our alerts slipped through the cracks and at 3 in the morning no one was alerted to get the site back up again, I wanted to know about it. And I wanted to know in advance, especially if it looked like something was going to happen before the site actually went down. If some telltale signs were there, so we've got New Relic in place, and New Relic is simply a server monitoring system and an application monitoring system. It's a platform. And it looks at different anomalies that can happen in the system, error rates, and disk I/O. It can look at hardware thresholds, like how much CPU is used and how much RAM is used, and all sorts of other metrics that can give you an indicator that your site may go down before it actually does. And so you set certain thresholds for that to alert you when something is looking like there may be a problem, and then other thresholds that if there is an actual problem that occurs before you get alerted, then you will get alerted when the site is actually down. So I had a chance to go through that with a fine-tooth comb. And ultimately, working with our partners, working in tandem with our partners, by the end of that next day, the site was already back up again, as I said, when I arrived at work. But by the end of that day, I was able to put a report together, an incident report, that I was able to share with the rest of the business to put everyone at ease, from the boss on down and the other department managers on down, that we had mitigated the situation from ever happening again for that same cause, that we had put better monitoring and alerting systems in place, that we had put some safety nets in place, that if something happened over at the host or the developers and they couldn't get to it, then we would be alerted and we could take proactive action to get that site back up again quickly. So I said all that to say that from a strategic perspective, look at the monitoring and alerting systems you've got in place today. Ensure that you understand who's responsible in a site down scenario, regardless of cause in the first instance. Then make sure you've got those extra safety nets in place to alert you if the people responsible don't take action for whatever reason. That you can slip through the cracks. Shit happens. That's the reality. That's life. And sometimes, systems don't work as well as you expect them to. So always have 1, 2, 3, 4 backups in place for monitoring systems. I'll put some links to some monitoring systems I'm very familiar with and I've used many times in the past and work very well. You've got Circonus, which is an offsite monitoring system. You've got various other systems and tools, like I said, New Relic, and then OpsGenie is that kind of nexus of where everything goes into to make sure that the right people get alerted at the right time in the right situations. So, site outages are something you're probably going to have to deal with at some point. Even if you're on a SaaS platform, it's always good to put remote monitoring in place so that if and when the site does go down, you're actually aware of it. You can be proactively contacting your customers in those scenarios. And more importantly, just so that you have the peace of mind to know that you're the master of your own destiny and you know exactly what's going on at all times in your business, because your online business is your business, and it's a primary channel for a lot of you for your revenue generation in your business. Even if you're an omni-channel business, online will be a significant part of your business. So hopefully this has been helpful. If you've got any questions around this that my experience may be able to provide some help with, do let me know in the comments, in the questions, and I'll do my best to respond to you. And hopefully this has been helpful. The Ask Gary V book competition is still on. It's running through episode 20, and then it'll be announced in episode 21 who the winners were. So get your comments in there, get your interactions in there, and go into that draw for the Ask Gary V book. So anyways, hopefully this has been helpful. If you've got any questions, let me know, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.